So when you actually get into the meeting, start by just asking the staffer, have they heard of kombucha? Do they drink it? Do they know what it is? And then just give them a little bit of education on kombucha, how it's made, what are the ingredients, how people enjoy it, and that there's a trace amount of alcohol that's a byproduct of fermentation. So this is a good time to really draw on how kombucha is consumed. You know, unlike beer and wine, kombucha is really consumed as a non-alcoholic beverage. It's sold in the produce section alongside fresh juices and sparkling water, and people might grab one as a soda substitute when they're gonna have salad for lunch. Or it's a health beverage and also something that people consume with food or is as a fermented food, similar to yogurt or kefir or kimchi, the types of foods that have really been made traditionally around the world for centuries. So giving the staffer an idea of how this product is consumed, if they aren't already a kombucha drinker, just kind of sets the stage for us to talk about why we're asking for this piece of legislation to be supported. So you can also talk about the growth of kombucha as an economy. So, 10 years ago, you could only find kombucha in the occasional health food store, whereas now it's everywhere. You see it at the airport, at 7-Eleven, at conventional stores, and even feel free to mention some of the big conventional supermarkets that are in your area so that they know that this is available in a wide range of places and isn't just kind of the hippie beverage that it may have started out as. So right now, if kombucha is tested and found to be over 0.5%, it's technically categorized as a beer simply because it's fermented. So there are a lot of non-alcoholic beverages that may have a trace amount of alcohol, like fresh squeezed apple juice, for example, but it's not subject to the federal excise taxes intended for beer because it's not intentionally fermented with sugar. So kombucha is unique in that it is falling into this category with beer in the Internal Revenue Code for the purpose of excise taxes, simply because it's fermented with sugar. And the code requires that anything fermented with sugar needs to be under 0.5% in order to be considered non-alcoholic for excise tax purposes. So what our industry is looking for is some relief from that. When this law or this code was written in 1933, there was no commercial kombucha, and we do not believe that Congress ever intended to regulate kombucha the way it regulates beer and wine. So our bill would increase the allowable ABV for kombucha alone from 0.5% to 1.25%. And that would give producers like us the flexibility to create a naturally brewed product and have it go through the cold chain, be transported and distributed into grocery stores, and know that it is a living beverage and it can change a little bit, and the ABV may go up a little bit during transport, but that we aren't going to be categorized as beer because of it. This is really a question of what kind of beverage is kombucha, how do people consume it, and what's it really comprised of, and kind of separating kombucha from beer is appropriate, not only in the way it's consumed, but also in the tax code. So right now, the way the regulation stands, it's harming our industry because it's introducing unnecessary risk. And a small producer who is running a small business in your state or district, they have a few employees, they're growing really fast. If they know that their bottle might be tested, and if it comes up at 0.6 instead of 0.5, that they could either be shut down or be subject to the federal excise taxes intended for beer, that may prevent them from growing or prevent them from taking on more employees or investment or expanding their facility. And that's really hindering job growth, as well as making small business owners feel insecure in their goals of growing their business. Being categorized as beer is an unintended consequence of the tax code. And the KOMBUCHA Act, which is the bill that we introduced in 2017, aims to exempt kombucha from the excise taxes intended for beer. So the passage of this bill for our industry would really allow for growth, for expansion, for taking on more investment, for adding more jobs, and for job security of those already employed by kombucha. The kombucha industry in last year was estimated to be over $600 million and is projected to be over $1.5 billion by the year 2020. So this is not an insignificant industry. It's responsible for at least 5,000 jobs across the country. And there are 500 plus kombucha brands in the United States. Many of them are small businesses or local regional brands that are growing and seeing more success and creating thriving communities. And the staffer of the senator or representative that you're meeting with can really help support that and encourage the growth by supporting our bill. So a little about the history of our lobbying movement. For the last 2 years, we've been regularly doing outreach and education about kombucha with staffers of senators and congressional representatives in the House in DC on Capitol Hill and also locally. So Hannah and I and many other brands such as Hum, High Country, GT's, Elixir, Bootleg, many across the country have joined us in DC to have days of meetings where we go around and meet with many different staffers and have the kind of meetings that you're about to have too, where we really educate them on kombucha, on our bill, and on what we really need from them. So we've made a lot of headway since we began about 2 years ago. Our goal in our legislation is to be included in a larger piece of legislation. And the legislation should be tax related since this is a tax provision. So sometimes we talk about our bill as a bill, but it could also be eventually an amendment to a larger piece of legislation. Sometimes we talk about it as a provision, but all of those things mean the same thing for our purposes. So in order to pass the Kombucha Act, Congress is never going to take time out of their day to actually all look at the Kombucha Act and vote on it as a standalone piece of legislation. But because we have done this outreach and education and have a lot of bipartisan support, and every legislator that we've met with has really agreed that this legislation makes sense and updating the tax code in this way makes sense and should be done, then we have the support necessary to be included in a larger piece of legislation should an opportunity come up. So a couple opportunities that we've tried to get into: in November of 2017, when Congress passed the tax reform package, Senator Cory Gardner from Colorado offered our bill as an amendment to that Tax Reform Act. In the end, and you can tell this to the staffer, it fell out of the legislation because of the Byrd rule, but it wasn't because it didn't have the support it needed. So we also tried really hard to get into the omnibus spending bill in March of 2018. And in the end, Congress did not include a large package of tax provisions, which is what we were hoping to get into. So that didn't end up being an opportunity for us. But moving forward, we may have an opportunity to be part of technical corrections to the Tax Reform Act or to a tax extenders package, which we anticipate could happen in the fall, or an FAA reauthorization, or any kind of tax-related legislation that moves through Congress presents an opportunity for us to be included as an amendment. But in order for that to happen, we need the support of the legislators that you're meeting with, both on a local level and in the DC level, in order to make that happen. Biggest advocates of the bill thus far are Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon and Cory Gardner from Colorado. They introduced the bill on the Senate side. The Senate bill is S-389, and on the House side, We have the HR 1089. That's the kind of sister bill on the House side. And that was introduced by Representative Jared Polis, Representative Walden from Oregon, Polis is from Colorado, Representative Tipton from Colorado, and Blumenauer from Oregon. Also recently, Senator Tillis from North Carolina signed on to the bill as a co-sponsor. So how can your senator or representative help us? We would love for your senator or representative to join on as a co-sponsor. And this is something you can really speak very directly about to the staffer. You can say, we really hope that your boss will sign on as a co-sponsor. And if he or she is not willing to co-sponsor, then could we count on them for support? And this support is really crucial, especially because the person that you're probably meeting with, the congressional representative or senator that you're meeting with, is probably either on the Senate Finance Committee or the House Ways and Means Committee. And the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance, those are the two committees on both sides of Congress that are responsible for tax writing legislation. So we need for every member of that committee to at least know what kombucha is, have heard of this bill, and feel comfortable including it in a larger piece of legislation that might move through Congress. So the meeting that you're having that educates this member on what kombucha is and the bill and why we're doing this outreach is crucial for them later to recognize, like, oh yeah, I've heard of this and I feel comfortable with it. Let's get it included.